Hey, what's good, everybody? It's your boy Shockwave48 here. Welcome back to another video. And today we got more information of the new, new chapter of My Hero Academia 360, no, 384, I believe. Yeah. So at the last chapter, we know Ashito, did something to stop the villains, and pretty much she has a new quirk awakening, and she pretty much passed out. We skipped to it, and then we moved to something else to this. So as right now, we're trying to figure out if what's going on in Shigaraki and Deku's area, so we're gonna get right into it. So let's go ahead and jump right in and check this out. Let's do this.
84 of My Hero Academia is titled It's a Small World. Let's get right into it. Thanks to Rukusu, Dabi's Pole Dance, and Justice for providing the leaks, and let's do it. But first, I quickly want to talk about this video's sponsor, Raid Shadow Legends. Take it away, Kabuki.
Yo guys, Kabuki here, filling in for Vocal Pineapple. This video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends. To celebrate Raid's 4th anniversary, I'd like to pick 4 champions and invite them to the party. Elhain is a critical monster. She can increase her chances of dealing them to enemies and even deal extra hits if she lands. If you like dealing big damage, she's the one for you. Aphel can increase her own attack and defense, gain an extra turn, and hit all her enemies before they even get a chance to strike back. She's a great pick for Arena if you're one for PvP. For all you speed demons, Gallic is your man. Not only can he place a speed boost on himself, he can decrease your enemy's defenses, meaning you and your allies can hit like a truck. A super useful pick for
I don't
raid
see what's the
dungeons.
point in
And
playing this
last but
game.
not
What's so
least,
special about it?
Kale. He's got poisons. He's got a
I
super
mean,
strong
even I don't
AoE
like
attack,
games like
and he
this.
remains super useful even after you pull more champions from the shards. Don't worry too much about picking champions though. All of them are super strong and you can summon the others via shards. But that's not all. Raid's 4th anniversary is finally here and there's tons to get excited about. Dedicated offers free gifts, promo codes, events, and brand new fashion events where you guys can get your hands on anniversary themed legendary champions. Right now you can use promo code 4YearsRaid to get 4 legendary totems, 4 energy refills, 400 energy, and 400k silver. This code is available for all users by April 9th. Oh, also, for Amazon Prime members who just got Genbo, keep an eye out for the next drop with some powerful Savage gear. It's available from March 2nd until March 30th. But there's more. New players can use the link in the description or scan the QR code right now to claim a free starter pack. So make sure to go check out Raid. All the links down in the description. Peace.
The chapter begins with Makia attacking All For One, and on the page we actually do see Makia continuing his attack against All For One by picking up pretty much a large section of mountain and forest in his hand, scooping it and getting ready to throw it at All For One as he screams out loud. On the same page we see Tokoyami realizing that this is all happening because of Shinso's brainwashing, and at that point he also wonders if an attack from All For One wouldn't nullify Shinso's quirk, but Hawks replies that Mountain Lady is blocking the attacks aimed at Makia, pretty much taking them all herself, or at least blocking them with the giant wrench that she's holding. And I really like the paneling that Horikoshi does on the page here, where between Tokoyami and the battle where Gigantomachia is swinging at All For One, we see that Tokoyami and Hawks are inside of the giant sort of dark shadow, but there's a dark shadow eye theme sort of separating line between the two different panels. We see All For One in the midst of all these different attacks that are coming his way, like the attacks from Mount Lady, Makia, Dark Shadow, and Inasa, and he's kind of destroying all the rocks and all the pieces of things flying towards him, or at least repulsing them away, so he's not really taking a lot of damage here, but we see that this is taking a lot of his focus, but not too much of his focus for him to stop thinking, because on this page we see that All For One starts thinking to himself, and he realizes at this point that the quirk that is being used on Makia right now, the brainwashing quirk, has to also be the same reason why the Aoyama family managed to deceive him earlier in the day at the very beginning of the war arc. He then mocks Shinso, saying that brainwashing is a method that only villains should use, and we see All For One reach his hand out towards Makia as some energy starts to come from his hand as he hits Makia with a giant shockwave to try and knock him back to his senses.
Whoa.
And this shockwave does seem to be incredibly powerful because it seems like it even sends Makia flying for a bit, but this is when things start to take a turn that I'm sure even All For One could not have predicted. We see as Makia recovers from this attack that All For One shot in his direction that he actually starts to speak and say something quite surprising. Makia says that he knows that that's All For One because of his smell, but he questions why All For One abandoned him in Jakku. All For One makes a really confused face at just exactly what is
That's
going on
weird.
here, but Hawks is also confused and wonders if Shinso is making Makia talk, but in that moment when he's thinking that, he wonders how Shinso could have done that so fast after the attack, especially since he didn't hear Makia respond to what Shinso said at any point in that moment. It's here where we then see a flashback to the moment where All For One leaves Makia in the mountains, and this actually had to be quite a long time ago, because this is before the fight with All For One and All Might, where All Might pretty much crushes All For One's head, because we see that All For One still does have his hair here when he's abandoning Makia. So you can assume it's been a pretty long time since the last time that Makia actually saw All For One in person before all of this stuff ended up going down. But even all the way that far back, All For One already had his plans for the future laid, because he tells Makia that his successor would come for him one day and that he's very sad to say goodbye. Makia says that he's been waiting all this time, but now he realizes that he was actually abandoned by All For One. And on the page, we see Makia start to cry as the top of his assault helmet starts to lift up a little bit and show his eyes. And Makia starts to cry, and of course you do maybe feel a little bad for this giant monster, because you know, it seems like even he has a heart. And there, as the tears start streaming down Makia's face, we see the sort of stone goggles that go over his face kind of lock down as he starts rushing back towards All For One once more, because it seems like Makia is actually switching sides to the heroes now. How's that gonna work? On top of Makia's head, we see that Kirishima protected Shinso from All For One's big attack, and Shinso says that this is the second time someone has resisted brainwashing, with the first being Midoriya. Obviously, that happened during the joint 1B versus 1A training arc, which we recently saw in My Hero Academia Season 5. This personally leads me to believe that Shinso's quirk doesn't really work all that well on people that have multiple quirks, because the two people that we've seen successfully evade this technique are, of course, people who do have multiple quirks. So I think that Shinso would have trouble using his quirk on All For One or Shigaraki. It might not work as well as he thinks. According to Shinso, though, this whole situation was
Here's to the healthy heroes,
Really?
the gluten-free gladiators.
was already weird enough, because he says even while Makia was being controlled, he on his own kept talking about his anger at being betrayed by All For One. So what Shinso did was just buy a little time so that Makia's own personal anger could grow by itself. In the past, many have said that Shinso actually acts in the same way as the villains, just like All For One remarked during this chapter, but his quirk can't actually change what's inside of people's hearts, so this anger coming from Makia for All For One is 100% genuine. And on the page where we saw that Kirishima was protecting Shinso, we do see Shinso talking for quite a bit, and All For One makes a pretty scary but resolved face towards Shinso in his direction, so we are gonna have to watch out for Shinso for a little bit to see if he's in any danger from the Demon Lord. And it's here where we get a pretty cool two-page spread by Horikoshi, starting with Shinso and then Hawks on the very far right side of a page, and then we continue to see Gigantomaquia, Mount Lady, and Dark Shadow all attacking All For One in sort of like a split-screen view together, before we get another almost full page of all their attacks colliding on All For One, who tries to evade but gets slammed down again by Dark Shadow, meaning the next time that we see All For One, if we're following the same logic as his last transformation, he's probably going to be even younger than before. This is where we finally cut to the helicopters that we saw coming in at the very end of last chapter, and here's where we start to see who was actually in those helicopters. We see that one of the people in the helicopters is an NHA reporter who appeared during the sports festival, Camino, and many other
Oh, so
arcs.
it's not
She and
Rhodey.
her buddy took a helicopter as soon
Okay.
as they saw a live stream on the internet showing a UA student fighting to protect everyone. And we see the two of them in a messy room discussing everything that's going on that live stream as they run out and head to the helicopter. Now, the reason that this reporter felt especially responsible for getting to the scene after seeing that stream is that she instantly realized that the person on that stream that she saw was Deku. And she remembers him from the time that she actually interviewed him about All Might becoming a teacher at UA at the very beginning of the story. So she actually gets emotional over how much he's grown in just 1 year, and she starts crying on board the helicopter. And she's exactly right. Deku has had to go through a lot of things in the 1 year that we've seen him in the series, and this makes me wonder if that other reporter who was only in a filler episode from My Hero Academia is actually paying attention to all this stuff going on as well. But I'm sure we could just assume that's the case. And shout out to that guy, because he apparently has the best scoop on Deku according to the events of that anime episode. Now, on a page that looks very much like YouTube, we see a zoomed in view of Deku fighting Shigaraki, and on the next next page, we actually get a shot of Deku grabbing Shigaraki's hands by the wrist as Shigaraki kind of pushes his hands down, trying to use decay on Deku, and Deku makes a very, very serious face as Shigaraki has a very wide grin and the crazy eyes, once again showing us that this is the Shigaraki that we've been following this entire time in the series. That's the only view that we get of Deku and Shigaraki this chapter. It was a nice quick little update, but we cut back to the helicopters and all the reporters that are inside of them, and we see that that reporter that we recognize isn't the only one, because the journalist who blamed Endeavor during the press conference earlier in the season is in the other helicopter, and she says the reason that she's here and she followed along is more for a personal goal than for professional journalism. She really just wants to see what the heroes who kept fighting are actually gonna do in this moment, because remember, she was one of the people that was loudest in her complaints about what the heroes were doing in abandoning society and all the things that they did to cause the war arc in the first place. But here she notes how these heroes kept fighting even after Japan was abandoned by the other countries, and she wants to be there to see the result of all of these efforts, whether they win or lose. We then see that the views on Gentle's live keep growing as we now know that there's actual news reports of it happening, and the views quickly go from just 7,000 views to over 20,000. And at this point, the chapter ends with the reporter saying she wants the world to know that it's not over yet, while we see many familiar characters watching the fight. And this is where I want to remind people that during movie 2, Funimation told everybody that the second movie wasn't canon and that the movies weren't canon, that it didn't spoil anything, and that caused a massive commotion in the My Hero Academia fandom, with many people all of a sudden saying that the movies weren't canon, even though that was never an issue, and we've had to deal with that for all the movies since then. But in this chapter, we can once again confirm that all of the My Hero Academia movies are canon, and people who don't think that they are really just have to deal with it. It's tough, because in the chapter we see characters like Roddy's siblings, Melissa, Mahoro, and Katsuma from movie 2, Agpar, Death Arms, the US president, and other international heroes that were featured in the third movie, all confirming that once again, the My Hero Academia movies are canon. And that's the end of the chapter with the reporters and everything happening. I don't believe My Hero Academia is on break next week, but you know. And of course, Horikoshi's comment in this week's Shonen Jump is, I learned about Aurora last month when she came to Japan, and I've been listening to her songs ever since. It was love at first sight. That's nice from Horikoshi. And Rukusu reminds us that this comment.
Okay, I think I heard enough. Wow, I don't know how long they're gonna actually keep attacking All for One because he's getting younger, but the fact that they're trying to do their best to keep him at bay is really giving Deku enough time to take out Shigaraki because you know they're like a lot of heroes are trying to do their best to keep All for One connected to Shigaraki because he's after his body to take All for One from Deku, and we can't let that happen. So. Yeah, and plus Deku's hands are pretty full right now, so he's got to do something. He's probably gonna fight back eventually in the next chapters. As far as Off One getting younger, I think that's probably his weakest. I think because the more they keep attacking him, and if he comes to be turned into a baby, I believe I don't know if that's possible, but if he does, then they might have a chance of beating him. I mean, I wouldn't say they actually kill a baby. I'm just saying, that there's a limit to how much he can use. So I'm not sure, but I look forward to seeing the next chapter. That's all I'm saying. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys later.